Sections 1, 2, and 3 of Shri Krishna, the Lord of Love, by Baba Premanand Bharati. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Section 1. The Concrete and Abstract God. See you that sun, beloved reader, shining radiant in the blue space above? Ancients worshipped it as a god, and the Hindus, the most ancient of all peoples, worship the sun as a god still. With joined hands filled with flowers and water and trembling with homage, the Hindus daily pray to this outer eye of the deity, this parent of all light and nature. O thou parent of the three worlds, I meditate upon thy power divine, which directs my intelligence. Praise the Brahman morning, noon, and evening as he bows in all reverence. This sun is the physical expression of the spiritual sun. Krishna, as the sun, the orb, is the concrete center of its abstract self in its diffused manifestation of light and heat, which pervades the universe. So this, the spiritual sun, Krishna, the source of the sun, is the concrete center of the diffused effulgence of his body, which pervades even the sunlight and its heat. Krishna has a form of which the most exquisite human form is but a crude counterpart. The effulgence of Krishna's body is the substance of all space and creation. This effulgence Krishna, with form Krishna for its center, from which it radiates, is love. As the physical sun's effulgence embodies or is coexistent with heat, so the spiritual sun's effulgence embodies and is coexistent with intelligence. This coexistent absolute love and absolute intelligence forms the being of this creation. Krishna is therefore called the embodiment of being, intelligence and bliss, or life, truth and love. Every particle of this radiance of Krishna's form body is not only instinct with these three attributes in one, but has within it the germ of Krishna's form and power. The belief that the first cause of the universe has no form is based partly on error of its conception and upon ignorance of the laws of nature. It is a delusion to think that all forms are human, material, and finite, and that to acknowledge that the Supreme Being has a form is to take away from him his absolute divinity, spirituality, and infinity. That which is not in the sea cannot appear in the tree which comes out of it, says an aphorism of the Vedanta philosophy. This being an undeniable truth, even from a common sense standpoint, it may be asked, if God is formless, and if that formless abstract God be the source from which the universe has come, then how can that creation contain any form? If man's creator is formless, to put the question in another way, wherefrom has he his form? If God has no form, then he can have no idea of form, and having no idea of form, how can he then create form? For creation is but expansion of idea. Creation has sprung from God's will, says the Holy Bible, as also the Veda. These tell us, and both the Christians and the Hindus are agreed on this point, that God has a will. What is will? It is but the function or attribute of the mind, just as where there is no fire, there can be no smoke, so where there is no mind, there can be no will. Once we admit that God has a will, we cannot escape admitting that he has a mind, the function of which will he exercised in order to create the universe. Now then, it being established that God has a mind, the question may be asked, Is that mind encased in a body? If so, what sort of a body is it? Is it physical? That is to say, is it formed of the same material of which the human body is made? Or is it a body made of abstract spirit? This is not possible, for mind is defined by the Vedas to be that principle within us which has the power of willing and non-willing. Scientists and modern philosophers define mind with practically the same purport. This vibration of the mind, willing and non-willing, is brought about or induced by the reflection cast upon, if by external or internal objects, through its channels of communication, the five cognizing senses, the physical counterparts of which are the eye, the ear, the nose, the palate, and the skin, which cognize respectively form, sound, smell, taste, and touch, under which five heads the Vedas have classified all forms of matter or objects. A mind without these five channels cannot exist, for, having no channels, it receives no impressions of objects, and has therefore no chance of either willing or non-willing, which is its attribute and its only substance and composition. Once we acknowledge that God has a mind, we cannot help acknowledging these channels of that mind, the five senses. God has therefore not only a mind, but the power of seeing, eye, the power of hearing, ear, the power of smelling, nose, the power of tasting, palate, and the power of feeling, skin. The mind has also five other powers, called its working senses, viz. The power of speaking, the power of holding, the power of moving, the power of excreting, and the power of generating, otherwise called the vocal organs, the hands, the feet, the excretory organ, and the generating organ. Thus God, possessing a mind, is bound to possess the 10 senses without which the mind cannot act, and inaction of the mind is its destruction or non-existence. God, having a mind, has to have an ego too, for mind is but a product or channel of the ego, which means I-ness or self-consciousness, so that God has all the principles of which man is formed, once it is admitted that God has a mind, and there is no sane man who can deny to God the possession of a mind of which the universe is the design and creation of which man is but a tiny part. The Christian Bible says that God has made man in his own image, which means that man is the reflection, more or less imperfect, of God. Is it then possible that what is not in the original is present in the reflection? If the human soul, according to this scriptural saying, is a reflection, image of the deity, has not that deity a mind and body, as its reflection the human soul has? The answer is, it has only the divine mind, being consummately pure in its state and perfect in its working, is absolutely powerful to create, preserve, and destroy, and the body in which the divine mind is encased is composed of a substance not of any material make. But what does this body of God look like? Is it like a human body? The answer is yes, but of a perfection of shape, symmetry, and beauty with which no human body can be compared. It is the original body, of which the human body is a poor imitation. The question will be asked, has God then as good a finite body as any of us? The answer is no, in capital letters. God's body is no more finite than the human body is. There is nothing in nature which is finite, not even a blade of grass or the tiniest speck of earth. All is infinite, all that you see around you or perceive within you. There is no such word as finite in the dictionary of nature, in the lexicon of creation. All that looks ever so small, and circumscribed to the fleshly eye of ignorance, is vast and endless to the eye of spiritual wisdom. All that to the physical sight is limited in shape and life is before the vision of the soulful student of creation's mysterious laws, limitless beyond grasp. Take a grain of earth and try to trace its origin by the light of the discoveries made by sages who probed into the inmost depths of nature with the needle of pure spiritual concentration, and you will find that the grain of earth has sprung from water, water from fire, fire from air, air from ether, and ether from sound, sound from mind in its effort to cognize outside of its objects projecting from within itself. Mind from ego, ego from consciousness, and consciousness from the infinite love ocean, the basic principle of creation. Can you call this grain of earth finite by any means or chance, especially when you come to know the mysterious laws by which that grain of earth develops into a blade of grass, and then through myriads of reincarnations of different life forms, goes back and merges into the ocean of love from which it had originally sprung. From love to earth, and from earth to love, thus is made up the circle of creation, and every point in its circumference is but a moving phase of the infinite in manifestation, man being but a stage in the upward evolution of the atom or a particle of earth, and his soul being a part of the universal soul, a wavelet of the love ocean. He is as immense in every way as the universe itself, as infinite as the essence of infinity. His form is but the center of his abstract self, called soul. This form is concrete-looking, but it is so only to the circumscribed vision of the fleshly eye of ignorance. The body of the supreme deity, Krishna's body, is concrete-looking, like man's, but infinite in the expansion of its radiance, or real self, just as, to repeat the simile, the orb of the sun is the concrete-looking center of its abstract self in the manifestation of its light and heat. The orb, its radiance, and its heat must altogether be called the sun, and not the orb alone. Krishna, the spiritual soul of the sun, as well as of the universe, has likewise a form center from which radiates to limitless infinity his effulgence called absolute love, which pervades all creation and space. This body of Krishna, the parent cause of the universe, is made up of concentrated absolute love, and is the home of the very finest ideas, potencies of the sense principles and the ego, mind, and intellect, which form the main factors of creation. The beauty of the body of Krishna changes like the shifting colors in a kaleidoscope into more and more soul-entrancing loveliness at every second, for it reflects the concentrated beauty and sweetness of the whole universe, charms warring with charms for supremacy, bubbling foam and froth of the sweetness of the nectar of love. Section 2. The Science of Creation. It is an intelligent conclusion to draw that the imperfect form creations of the Creator reach a perfect stage or center towards which all imperfections converge in order to reach perfection. That center does exist. That stage is the stage by the standard of which all imperfections of things and phases in nature are known and judged. That center is the Supreme God Himself, Krishna. Krishna, both concrete and abstract, has three main spiritual attributes: love, intelligence, and light. Love is the first attribute and the cause of the two others. As the sun, the orb, and its effulgence, to once more repeat the analogy, are one and the same thing, as the flame and its light are one and the same thing, as without the sun there can be no sunshine, as without the flame there can be no light. In other words, as light is inseparable from both the sun and the flame, so Krishna, though he has a form as finite-looking as a human form, is not only infinite in his all-pervading radiance, but that radiance is inseparable from his finite-looking form center. As sunshine again is inseparable from heat, so the effulgence of Krishna's central self is inseparable from intelligence. This universal, all-pervading intelligence, again, is inseparable from existence or being, otherwise called life. These three absolute spiritual attributes form Krishna's body, both concrete and abstract. Thus, both the concrete and the abstract Krishna are the embodiment of bliss, intelligence, and being, which are coexistent and interpenetrating. Before creation, then, there was nothing but this Krishna, the three absolute spiritual attributes in one substance, so to speak, for Krishna or Parabrahm cannot be called substance, and yet there is no word to indicate it. As mosses formed out of water float on the surface of that water, soaking in it, so does creation, springing out of this bliss, intelligence, and being, the all-pervading abstract self of Krishna, float, soaking in it. Let us try to understand the mystery of the birth of this ever-changeful material creation from its eternally unchangeable parent, the concrete and infinite Krishna. I've already said how every atom of this creation is composed of all the 24 principles, and how in its backward motion to return to the first or primal principle, that atom opens, one by one, the passages of these principles, and how, when it develops into man's stage after passing through innumerable life forms in the course of its evolution, it opens the passages of all the principles more or less. It is the opening of these passages of all of its composing principles in the man stage of the atom that makes it fit to be called a miniature universe, for through these openings it communicates more or less freely with the all-pervading principles of the universe. The more developed this man stage becomes, that is to say, the clearer the openings of these passages, the more correct an index it is of the inner laws and workings of the great universe. Because man has the whole universe within himself, just as an acorn has the whole oak tree in potency dwelling within it, therefore he can, by diving deep within himself, find out the mysteries of the producing source, being, and processes of working of the universe. If we think on the process of the development of a tree from a seed, we will find that process as marvelous as the most marvelous phenomena of nature. Indeed, this process of the birth of a tree out of a seed is the process in miniature of the birth of the universe out of Krishna love. This process of creation is being repeated every moment throughout creation itself. The laws of production and destruction, formation and disintegration are the same in scientific exactitude as those which produce and form and destroy and disintegrate the universe. The operation of these laws is going on as much in the inner as in the outer world of ours, as constantly on the mental plane as on the physical. The law which brings forth a tree out of a seed is exactly the same as that which in a finer manifestation operates through the birth of a thought in our mind. The rooting, the shooting, the growing, the flowering, and the fruiting of a tree is but a gross reproduction of the process by which a thought awakes, develops, and takes shape and action within us. The stages of a thought's birth can be clearly perceived when the mind is calm. At first there is an unknown feeling, then an indefinite vibration which develops into abstract idea. Idea develops into thought, and thought becomes action. Out of Krishna love, creation springs into existence like a thought. Thought exists in our mind like a seed in the shape of previous impressions of objects and ideas. So the seed of creation lies in the bosom of Krishna in the shape of impressions of ideas of previous creations. This seed or germ is made up of three attributes called sattva, illumination, raja, activity or motion, and tama, obscuration or darkness. So long as these three attributes forming the essence of the germ are in equilibrium, that is to say, are of equal degree or force or intensity, creation remains in the germ state in the bosom of its first cause, Krishna. But the moment there is the least tendency of any of these attributes of this germ essence to fall out of equilibrium with the other two, that is to say, when one becomes more powerful than the others, then they start out of the central self, Krishna encased in another form, almost like unto the Krishna form, a state which is analogous to the unknown feeling state in the development of human thought. This state is called Vasudeva, which again has a form center of its abstract self-radiance, pervading all space. It is the least pronounced state or stage of differentiation induced by the tendency of loss of equilibrium in the even forces of the three cardinal attributes, gunas, illumination, motion, and obscuration. The second stage, called sankarsana, analogous to the indefinite vibration stage of the development of thought, has again a form center of its all-pervading abstract self-radiance. This sankarsana is the unconscious cause of creation. The third stage, called pradamna, analogous to the abstract idea stage of thought, has likewise a form center of its all-pervading abstract self-radiance. This is the semi-conscious cause of creation, and from this develops the fourth stage, called aniruddha, which is analogous to the full developed thought stage and is the full conscious cause of creation. This aniruddha is called Vishnu or Narayan, from Nar water, and Narayan bed, because he floats on his back on the water of love life, while out of his navel springs a gigantic lotus, a figurative expression meaning the universe in bud, in which is encased the sleeping Brahma, the operating creator, with the germ of creation dwelling within his mind and about to shoot forth. In Aniruddha, the real stage of inequilibrium of the attributes, gunas, develops, and in Brahma it assumes full development. With the opening of the petals of the mystic love lotus, Brahma awakes from his sleep, deep trance state, and unable for a moment to understand the meaning of the lotus bed or the water of life around, just as a man suddenly roused out of sleep is dazed and forgets to think and therefore feels stupid for the moment. He goes down through the hollow of the lotus stalk in order to find out the bottom of the lotus. He goes down, 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 and at last finds its depth unending, bottomless. He therefore comes up to the surface again and sits down mystified when he suddenly hears a voice from the water, as it were, saying, Tapa, 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 which means meditate, meditate, meditate. With the sound of that word, the meaning becomes apparent to Brahma. It means, why art thou looking outward? Look inward, and thou shalt know. Whereupon his eyes involuntarily close, and his mind becomes concentrated inward. Then he sees before his mental vision Aniruddha, Vishnu, appear and say, O awakened one, know and remember that thou art Brahma, the Creator. At the very suggestion, he finds out his own self and exclaims, Oh yes, I am Brahma. Then Vishnu again says, Thou hast now to create the universe. Oh yes, he exclaims, as the memory of his function springs within him, I am to create the universe. But how? By meditating upon the former creation, as the memory of past creation, which dwells within thee, shall awake, creation will begin. With hearing begins action, and as Brahma concentrates his mind upon his former creation, its memory in time flashes through him, and with the flashing of that memory, creation manifests itself in the shape of earth and sky and trees and grass and ocean and rivers, and in time, beast and bird and man, all complete. Just as a master painter first designs a picture in his mind and reproduces that design upon the canvas, even so is the picture of creation produced upon the canvas of love life. Only the painter Brahma paints with the brush of his all-powerful mind force, which, the moment the design forms in his mind, is materialized into living substance. Section 3. The Steps of Creation. The Veda says that the universe is like a tree, that is to say, it is a tree, the roots of which are embedded in the unmanifested first cause, Krishna. Aniruddha is the seed, and Brahma is the first sprout. This analogy between the seed and the sprout, between Aniruddha, also called Vishnu, and Narayan, and Brahma, seems so perfect that it justifies the conclusion that the process of the birth of a plant is only an imitation of the process through which the universe springs into being. As in the germination of a seed, two lobes called cotyledons, which form part of the seed, come out prior to the appearance of the stem which shoots forth between them, so out of the navel of Narayan, Aniruddha, first appear two cotyledons called lotus in the figurative language of the Veda, and between the cotyledons sprouts forth the stem in the shape of Brahma, who is the miniature embodiment of the universe. Before Brahma was born, Narayan created universal consciousness, which was but the manifestation of his own consciousness, called Mahat, which means immeasurable. Out of consciousness sprang ego, ahankara. Out of ego sprang mind. Out of mind sprang ether, akasha. From ether sprang water. Out of the friction of ether and water sprang air. This air, rising up from the ocean of water, with great noise, created by its friction with water flames of fire, illuminating all space. This fire became mixed up by the cohesive attribute of air with water and ether, and all four elements became one thickened molten mass, and as it rose upward, the liquid substance which issued from it became solidified and cooled in process of time, and formed into earth. Then the lotus cotyledons sprang forth from the navel, Sanskrit navi, middle, of Narayan, and within them Brahma, the stem, shot forth. His body was made of the five elements and consciousness, mind, and ego. He is also said to be the central form embodiment of ego, ahankara. Brahma is but the creative form potency of Narayan. When Narayan bade him to meditate upon his former creation, and told him also that the moment the memory of former creation would awake within him, creation would begin. Brahma meditated as he was told, and creation began, as that memory of the past creation flashed within him. Thus it will be seen that Narayan, Aniruddha, is the real creator. He creates at first the 8 main abstract and concrete principles, viz. Consciousness, ego, mind, and the 5 elements, ether, air, fire, water, and earth. After the creation of these was created the first concrete form, Brahma, who was to create the details of creation. But even these creations were not the product of the arbitrary will of Narayan, though their expressions were subject to his will or mediumship. The seed bud of creation dwelt in the most mysteriously abstract state within Krishna, absolute love, a state so similar to that first principle that it would enter and merge itself in it. If we cut a seed in halves, we find in it not even a suggestion of the tree of which it is the seed. But if we plant it in the soil, the rudimentary form of the tree's organism, called the germ, asserts itself and creates its state of differentiation from its original state of homogeneity. So from the tendency of the least in equilibrium of the forces of the 3 cardinal attributes, sattva, raja, tama, which, having formerly attained equality of force, have lost their different individualities, and have become merged and transformed into pure sattva, illumination, springs the germ state of creation, and passing through its 3 stages, viz. Vasudeva, Sankarsana, and Pradyumna, reaches its 4th stage called Aniruddha, where, having attained further development, it sprouts forth into Brahma, the first visible miniature embodiment of the universe. As out of the tiny but potent shoot of the plant, from the seed, the details of the tree, viz., trunk, branches, leaves, flowers, and fruit, spring forth to attain its full-grown state, so out of its minute but potent shoot, the details of the universe, viz., earth, heaven, sun, moon, stars, day, night, mountains, rivers, vegetation, spiritual beings, animals, men, etc., spring forth to attain its complete form. The manifestation of universal consciousness, Mahat, is called the first step of creation. The birth of ego, Anhankara, out of consciousness, is called the second step of creation. That of mind from ego is the third step. That of the five elements, ether, air, fire, water, and earth, from mind is the fourth step. That of the five attributes of the elements, sound, touch, form, taste, and smell, from the elements, is the fifth step. That of the five cognizing senses, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, out of these five attributes, also called objects, is the sixth step. That of the five working senses, speaking, holding, moving, excreting, generating, from the five elements, is the seventh step. That of gods and aerial, invisible beings, is the eighth step. That of trees and plants and shrubs and grass and all other vegetation, as also that of the wild animals and birds, is the ninth step. That of domestic animals and men and women is the 10th step. These steps or series of creation have developed between long intervals. These are called purely natural creations through the instrumentality of the mind force of Anuruddha, Narayan, and Brahma. End of section 3.